Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. This is Conchita. Thank you so much for being here. We are doing our webinar on robotics and coding with Gina Fugate. We're very excited to have her. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can go ahead and type them into the chat box, or you can speak them at the end as well. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Gina. Don't forget to check out our TBI portal where we have a couple more professional developments coming up in June, and then we'll start back up in September.
So, hello everybody. This is my first webinar. So Conchita is going to be coaching me a little bit. But I am here to talk about robotics and coding, which has been particularly popular this year. And we have been so fortunate to have so much success at Maryland School for the Blind. So I'm going to start by talking about really how all of this took off. And on the screen right now is a picture of one of our business cards that we use this year with both robotics teams. So the front of the business card has the Maryland School for the Blind logo, as well as the text Maryland School for the Blind, Achieving Independence. It also has the Quorum logo, which is a blue circle with a white rabbit that has one crooked left ear and his right ear sticking straight up, and he's wearing a pair of glasses. And then to the right of that logo is the word Quorum. That's Quorum, and that is the name of the accessible programming language that we use for First LEGO League EV3 robotics. So Maryland School for the Blind has had a First LEGO League team since 2012, but this is the first year that we have used the accessible programming, and that's really a huge part of our story. The business card also has in text .5 UDogs. And just to clarify, because a lot of people ask me, it is DOT, the number 5, UDOGS. And that was done on purpose when they founded the team, because .5U means under in Braille. So it's really the underdogs, but they had it spelled out like that so that people would ask questions. So that's also sort of a secret strategy of ours, because anytime we introduce ourselves, everyone says, what is that and how do you say it? And it gives us an opportunity to tell our story. Underneath that text is the #6040, and that is our assigned team number through First LEGO League. There's also the text that says 180 Optimum. That is our outreach team. That is now 2 years old, and the official assigned number from First LEGO League is #36214. So again, those team numbers are used at First LEGO League tournaments in order to identify a team. So a little bit more about this business card. This is the first year that we've used these cards, and our students were handing them out at First LEGO League qualifiers, and then as we've had incredible opportunities this year, anytime we've gone to an event like Pi Day, for example, in Annapolis, or the Chesapeake Lighthouse Foundation's STEM Fest on May 4th, may the build be with you, we took cards with us so that we could hand them out. So this card tells our story, and it was one of the ways that it helped us really to not only help other people learn about Quorum, but to learn about why we were doing it and other things that we were asking First LEGO to think about regarding accessibility. I'm going to change. Okay, yep, next slide, please. This is really just a goofy picture, but this is how I learned about Quorum. So last July, I attended EPIQ, which is EPIQ, and that is an acronym for Experience Programming in Quorum. So this is everyone that attended EPIQ that was hosted at the Texas School for the Blind. So it's just a group picture, and we have our arms crossed, and everyone's supposed to be making a C with their hands, and we were told this was the computer gangster sign. So there are some people that look really serious in this photo, but most people are laughing and smiling. But it is a crowd of many characters, and I would just really like to emphasize that, you know, I went to this training. I don't technically have a computer science background. Computer science was not my undergrad nor my master's, but EPIC is designed to be hospitable really to everyone, whether you're a teacher of the visually impaired or a general teacher. It's really to help you learn about Quorum and everything that it can do. So you spend, in that case, over a week learning about all the different things that Quorum allows you to do, from Lego robotics to using graphics and video games. And what's super cool about this is on the front row, so it's the bottom left hand when you're looking at this photo, is Andreas Stefik, and he is the founder of Quorum. So you have the guy who really made it happen the whole time. He's one of the presenters, of course, but he's also just making the rounds and teaching you all about the programming language. There's a whole host of support from his students. And then there are teachers of the visually impaired and other professionals who have attended EPIC for years. And then there were newbies like me. We can go on to the next slide. So this is really just a screenshot that, well, I guess it's two screenshots. It shows the main homepage, which is quorumlanguage.com. So the text on the screen has the full website, www.quorumlanguage.com. And on the left side of the screen, it has the main homepage that says the Quorum programming language, and then it has some of the different things that you can explore there. And then on the right side, I have a screenshot of the robotics track of the Quorum page, and that's where you would want to go if you were specifically interested in the Lego EV3 robots. If you want to check out this website and you're sort of curious about everything, then I would start out on the homepage and probably go to Learn, but there are different tracks. So there's the robotics track, there's a AP computer science section, and all of this really complements everything that is supported with code.org. So Stefik and his team have closely collaborated with code.org, and this is a way to make all of that material accessible to everyone. Next slide. This is one of the favorite photos that I have from this season. This is 180 Optimum, and they are actually in judging for the robot game. So we have a lot of kids basically standing around the robot game table. It has the mat on it, and it has all the Lego models. And they're with not one, not two, but three judges. And this is the point where they have to go in and answer questions from the judges, explain the coding that they have done, and then also demonstrate a mission. What I really like about this photo is the kids are running solo, which they have to in this judging arena, but they're not dependent on me at all. And that's a big change really this year, and it's because of us being able to do Quorum. Prior to doing Quorum, we had to take visual screenshots of the visual coding blocks because it wasn't accessible with JAWS or even Zoom text. We couldn't even do magnification on it. So I had taken screenshots of some of the coding blocks, and then from there I had enlarged them, added large print, laminated them, and then added a Braille label. And as you can imagine, that's a really long process. It's a little bit tedious. And at the moment that someone is using a visual coding block and they place that block sort of on the coding palette, that block can expand, and it gives you other options that could include a drop-down menu or a blank to enter a numeric value, but that still didn't make it accessible even when I made that flashcard system, because we would have had to have probably hundreds of flashcards to really cover all of the options. So because of Quorum, it's just a complete game changer. And one of the students in this picture actually had refused to join 180 Optimum until Quorum came. So I think that speaks for itself. Next slide, please. This is another photo, and this is at the same tournament, but most of the kids in this photo are focused on about 3 of the 180 Optimum kids, and everyone is focused on them. And once again, I'm not in the photo because our kids are presenting to them about Quorum, as well as a tactile mat that we used in this case. So they're all standing around a robot game table, and there's roughly 10 kids easily, basically looking at our students, the 180 Optimum students. And then Lila and Bryce Dobry, who also mentored and helped out our team this year, are present, but they're even looking at our students. So it was really a question and answer session, and I was able to sneak into the background and just take pictures. So again, everything changed this year because of Quorum, because of Empower Mats, and because of those wonderful handy dandy business cards. This just shows a couple other things from the season. So the photo on the top left is a student at Maryland School for the Blind with their student laptop. And he's checking out Quorum. This was fairly early in the season, I think. So we were also fortunate to start a computer science class this year, and that allowed us to do a lot of troubleshooting. So we had the computer science class, and then we had 2 First LEGO League teams. And in First LEGO League style, we used what we call cooperation. So as we were all learning Quorum for the first time and running into bugs and all the things that come with that first year of learning something, we were sharing information even between teams, including code and problems that we had run into. So it was really 3 levels of support just through MSB itself. And then of course we had the Quorum team with Stefik and a host of other people from his team. We have one of our handy dandy business cards in the bottom left-hand corner that I had described previously. And then we have a photo over on the right, and it's one of our students, and she's wearing bunny ears that are blue, so it complements the Quorum colors, which are always blue. And she's at a Braille writer. So another sort of secret weapon that we've discovered is if we take a Braille writer with us and a stack of index cards, it's a great way to get our peers from other teams to come over, talk to our students, interact with them. We usually start out doing names, and by the end of the exchanges this year, we had students coming back, can you also do my best friend's name, or can you do this sentence? So it was another great way and an example of how social skills really blend into all the computer science and just everything that happens with First LEGO League. So this screenshot is a little more complicated. So I'm going to start over on the left side of the screen. There's some text which describe different commands. So I'll go through that first, and then I'll talk about the visual display. So it starts out with project, and then it says control 1, and then editor, control 0, and then output, control 4. And then in the next case, I took a little itty bitty screenshot of a hammer, and that goes with build F11. And then another little screenshot, which is really a triangle pointing to the right, and that goes with run F6. So all of these are different key commands to show how you move around on the screen independently. So the right side of the screen, which really is the most complicated part of the screen, is showing a screenshot of Sodbeans itself. Sodbeans is what they call the IDE. that allows us to do coding. So Sodbeans is really NetBeans, but it has accessibility plugins. And it's really just the place where you type your code, and you can use NetBeans, Sodbeans to type that code, and then in our case, transfer it over to the Lego EV3 brick, and then check it out and see if your programming works. So if a student is hitting Control-1, they're able to look at previous projects that they've saved over on that, it looks like a column visually. The editor window with Control-0 is the main place where the coding is visually present and where you're focused most of the time. Output is where we would focus after we have used the build, the F11 command, and we would go down there to see if our build was successful. So for anyone with vision that can see that itty bitty print, it does say build successful, and it shows the date and time of that build. But again, I think this is really a big deal, because with Lego EV3 Mindstorms, we couldn't get to the file menu and we couldn't get to the different blocks. So it's almost incomparable to try to talk about that journey. It's just a huge leap. So even though Quorum is text-based and in a lot of ways is much harder than anything that is a visual drag and drop program, I would much rather we do this than the visual drag and drop. And the students agree with that most of the time. When we run into some bugs or we make a lot of typos, something like that, a code will not run successfully. So that's an example of why it is more difficult. But even so, the students don't want to use a flashcard system and to be dependent on me. So that's the reason why we have Quorum. And Quorum is definitely dedicated to accessibility. There are some challenges with using Sodbeans right now because the developer of it, which I believe is called Oracle, has some, I guess, intermittent support for things like Braille displays. But Stefik is on it. So the good news is that Stefik is about to launch Quorum Studio, and that is scheduled to take place in July. So Sodbeans will still be present. If you're watching this webinar, don't panic. You can still use that, and I'm sure we'll still be using that. But Quorum Studio is going to be even better, and they are working on Braille display support because, of course, you need this with all of the typing and editing. So if you're watching this webinar and wondering about things, definitely send us questions and reach out to us at Maryland School for the Blind or to Stefik directly through the quorumlanguage.com website. So this is a slide that is trying to show a little bit of the logistics of First Lego League. On the left side, there is a picture that shows two different objects. The first one is a printout, an 8.5 by 11, that shows the visual overview of the robot game. So it's a picture of the robot game mat with the Lego models built onto it. Visually, there is sort of a white arched area on the bottom left-hand corner, and that's what we call home base or base during the robot game. There are programming lines that two of them look like a capital T, and then there's three of them that look like a bold black line kind of sticking out from the border of the robot mat in different places. And that bold black line is outlined by a white space. Those are really important things for us to know about because a robot could be programmed to go stop at that line and then follow the line to somewhere to complete a mission. So you have to be able to understand what is on the mat in order to really play the robot game. So below this 8.5 by 11 piece of paper is what we often call a P-off at Maryland School for the Blind. And that's called Pictures in a Flash, so it's an acronym. And it's really a thermoform paper where we have either hand-drawn or use PowerPoint. There's different methods and strategies, but we have made a accessible tactile graphic in order for our students to know what is on that mat. Otherwise, the mat has not been accessible to our students. That too has started to change this year thanks to empowermats.com, and that's what I featured on the right side of this screen. So the EmpowerMats logo is there, and then that photo that we looked at earlier that has the 180 Optimum kids with the judges is also there. And again, it was just part of the journey. We had so many people helping us this year. It was really incredible. And empowermats.com in particular, they were already making robot mats. So if you go to robotmats.com, you can see Mr. Marco's work, but Mr. Marco has worked with First Lego League for a long time, and he's been aware of .5 U-Dogs in particular. So one day when we were talking about how those black lines aren't raised enough for our kids to feel what's going on the mat, we started to really collaborate together to see if we could make it tactile. So the progress is still moving forward. It's slow and steady, and I think that it will continue to progress. They have released information for next year for First Lego League. At this time, there's nothing officially accessible about the mat, and those are already being produced. So we'll still have to use the pictures in a flash method and work with Mr. Marco for an Empower mat. But the good news is that First Lego League itself and Lego has reached out to Maryland School for the Blind. They visited us recently. So they're aware of our needs, and as I like to say to them and just about everyone all the time now, we're all in cooperation supporting our team, so that those advocacy efforts have helped us. So this slide is really just an attempt to kind of break down information for anyone who's not familiar with First Lego League, or someone who's watching this that might not be familiar with blindness or visual impairments. This image is taken from the Into Orbit First Lego League season that we just completed. And it's a picture of a satellite. So there's pretty much a black background. There's some white specks representing stars. The satellite itself is mostly white or shades of gray. And there is a section of it that has sort of like a blue rectangle. We can go into the next image. This is using an app that basically simulates what it's like to have a cataract. So it's something I've used to help First Lego League judges, volunteers, various people that we've met throughout the season to understand what it might be like to have some functional vision, but to also have difficulty visually accessing information. I have to address this pretty often because we're constantly in a position of teaching others about blindness and visual impairment. So sometimes they, will think blindness means total blindness, no functional vision, and we're always sort of explaining those experiences. And then this is another slide, really with the same satellite image, but in this case we made it blurry, so it is showing what it would be like to have a decreased acuity. And again, that was like a really small sample of what it might be like to have severely impaired vision. While I like these simulators, they always have limits. I would say that it's nothing like what my vision is like when I look at the simulators for retinitis pigmentosa. So everyone is different, and we just always encourage those that are interacting with us, if they have questions, to ask us. So this is a photo of .5 U-Dogs, because I try to make sure I give both teams attention anytime I'm talking about them. And I believe we are just standing in line waiting our turn to go up to the robot game in this instance. So I'm in that photo with several of our students and another colleague who serves as a Lego coach. The kids are smiling for the most part. One looks maybe a little bit nervous, but at this point, we've been through at least a couple rounds of the robot game, and we're just getting ready to go up again. So another question that I'm often asked is, are we competing against other kids who are blind or visually impaired? And the answer to that is not to our knowledge. Everyone that we have encountered have been from teams that appear to have students with typical vision. So again, this has been quite the opportunity to teach everyone about Maryland School for the Blind, about what it's like to use an accessible programming language, and that they have the option of using that same programming language. So it's been really great to be involved in that journey. So one of the things I wanted to do during this webinar is to sort of give some recognition to other things that have helped us along our journey. So in this slide in the top left-hand corner, there's a partial screenshot from legofortheblind.com. So there's a stack of Lego bricks visually, sort of a cartoon image, and then it says Lego for the Blind in text. It shows part of the menus on the website, which include about, instructions, and press. And then to the right of this image is just simply the website, http://legofortheblind.com/. And Lego for the Blind is founded by Matt Schifrin. And Matthew is one of the supporters and encouragers of our team. I got in touch with him when I first got involved with First Lego League, when I ran across his website. And there's also an image here on the bottom that has Matthew in the image with a lady, and she is interviewing him. And the link is there to the YouTube video, and it explains from Matthew's perspective how he uses Lego to understand visual images. So he talks pretty thoroughly about how Lego allows him to build things and understand concepts that he wouldn't otherwise be able to access tactily. So a simple example that I give to people is, understanding the height of towers or the architecture of the Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building, I think he refers to, but he explains how important that is to him. And he also shares his own story because he has an incredible friend of his family who took the time to create a text-based description of several Lego model sites. And that is what allowed Matthew to use his device, which in the video, I believe it's an Apex. He's accessing the text-based instructions, he's using Braille, and then he's locating the pieces, and he is doing the builds independently. So in talking with Matthew, he is still always encouraging Lego in cooperation, of course, to make those builds accessible, because as many of you may know, Lego directions are visual, and that's not accessible to everyone. So Matthew had told me that Lego was aware of the website and the importance of the text-based directions. Matthew is very busy, and he's attending conservatory as a musician, of course, but he's still dedicated to Lego for the Blind and trying to get out more text-based descriptions for builds. What's really great is he has gotten responses from all over the world. So if anyone wants to volunteer to help Matthew out and sort of learn the Lego text building directions, that is another way that you can help Matthew and really our teams if you have the time to do that. This is another resource I wanted to share. Everyone is always asking us about coding, and Quorum is really pretty complicated. When a lot of people ask me about coding, they don't necessarily have a lot of experience with coding. They just hear about it and the importance of STEM careers. And so I've started to explore other resources, and that includes contacting other colleagues that we can network with. And one of the things that is accessible is the Sphero Spark robot ball. And so on the top left-hand corner, there's a screenshot, and it's actually from Perkins School for the Blind. And the website to that is to the right of the image. But it is an activity that Diane Bronner has set up using Spiro. And she has taken the time to not only set this up to where it's fully accessible, but she's sharing all of the materials for free. And it also has an alternative app. So the long story short is that she's using QR codes, large print and Braille, in order to allow kids to have these manipulatives where they can program the robot ball by themselves. It's still going to take some instruction in order for the students to lay out the materials and take pictures of them and handle the app with voiceover and all those things, but it is fully accessible. So it's really something that I would encourage people to look at if they're not quite ready for Quorum and all of the typing and editing involved, but want to get into something that has a lot of action really quickly. Spiro itself also has a JavaScript coding option. So that is something else that I'm in the process of exploring. So again, I just have a screenshot, and it's of a Google slide presentation called Introduction to JavaScript Coding. It's by Bob Cook, and I believe he's based in Georgia. This is featured on Spiro's website, so I listed the link for Spiro, and then it leads to this tutorial. I've been in touch with Bob Cook, and he shared the slide with me directly so I could get in order to edit things and make it more accessible for our students. But I'm still in the process of exploring that. So it's an example of another route that a student could explore if they want to learn some JavaScript. JavaScript is one of the most common coding languages. So when I talk with parents and students about coding, I'm trying to connect them with real world experiences to understand that JavaScript can create web pages and all of the opportunities with STEM. So we will definitely always play with Lego EV3 robots, and I think the Spiro balls, but I also think it's really important to connect to STEM careers and help our students to understand all those things. And I think that might be our last slide. Yeah.
So if there's a TBI out there who is wanting to get their students involved in robotics, first Lego League, or coding, what's the first thing they should do?
I think the first thing to do is to look at Stefic's website, quorumlanguage.com, but they definitely could reach out to us at Maryland School for the Blind. If they're listening to this webinar, just reviewing all of those resources, and then empowermats.com also references the Quorum website and has sample coding on it along with videos. So really any of those resources would definitely help. And I would really encourage people to attend EPIC. So in July of this year, for July 15th to the 19th, it's being hosted at Washington State School for the Blind, and it's the 10-year anniversary. So it's going to be extra epic, to give a corny joke. But reach out and get in touch. Stefic is definitely busy, but he and his team have always gotten back to us. We've never been left hanging. And then through EmpowerMats, we had Mr. Marco, as well as Lila. Lila is experienced in First Lego League, and then her dad just happens to be a programmer who, happened to help us out with Quorum and took a couple panicked phone calls from me. So I think just reach out and get in touch with someone who is using it and, go from there. But don't hesitate or be afraid to do that. And hopefully don't be intimidated by it. I would have never guessed that we would have accomplished everything that we did this year. And I say that very openly. I said it on the day that Lego visited our school. When Josh Egypt, my supervisor, gave us the okay, I eventually went back to him and said, what happens if we don't score? And he did smile and he said it would be okay, but it would be best if we could score. But we really did fine, and we were not last place, we were not first place, but we proved our point that this accessibility thing, is a big deal, and I think we demonstrated that, and that's the reason why Lego came to our school. So I think the accessibility will just keep getting better and better.
That's great. And what are the ages for the students to participate in the Lego League?
So that varies state to state. So you really want to check that out. For Maryland, it's ages 9 to 14. And then something else that we have done is we had one student who had been on 180 Optimum, wanted to still be involved with 180 Optimum, but had clearly aged out. So it wasn't, a case where they were changing their age right before we went to tournament or something like that. They were clearly too old, but they also needed service learning hours, as a high school student. And so that student became a junior coach, and there's still a lot of demand right now. So I anticipate that junior coaches might become a regular thing for us. And I hope, because there's always tons to do, but it's really nice for peers to lean on peers, for everything from coding to stay calm, it's okay, all of those things. So we welcome anybody to be involved at this point.
And what would you say are some prerequisite skills for students to have that are, thinking about doing this?
So, because Quorum is so involved, we really ideally need students who have strong keyboarding skills and spelling. And programming requires a lot of analysis, critical thinking, reflective thinking. So it's not as easy as the drag and drop, let's, move steering block, pop in a number and see what happens. We really have to go through and use what they call a library. I didn't know until I started to become a coder that robots use libraries. So that's a big joke with us. And if we get stuck, we have to go back to the library and start all over again. So they really need to have all of those skills. Now, coding is one portion of First Lego League. So there's still something called the project. And that involves that theme I referred to earlier, was into orbit. And this past season, it involved identifying a problem with humans living in space long term. So you're kind of given these different clues, and they give some guidance in the challenge handbook, but having research skills. So yes, they need to be able to Google it, but they need to be able to review what they're Googling. Whether that's an article or the NASA website. So there's some strong academic skills that are really needed. And then we have to be able to not only identify a problem, they have to come up with a solution on their own. So it's really a ton of work, and that's also what we say all the time. The third category of First Lego League is core values. So that's really about teamwork. So that's the moment when, if Johnny was the person typing in Sodbeans and he made a lot of typos and the program crashed, how do you interact with Johnny when you're sitting right beside him and, oh no, it doesn't work? How you communicate to your own teammates. And what I think is really cool about Lego is it's also about how you communicate with other teams. So generally in the robot game, there is a task where you can score points for your team and possibly the other team. So this cooperation and gracious professionalism, all these terms that they have in their handbook are definitely a part of competition. They emphasize to us that you have to do well in all three parts of First Lego League in order to move up in the competition. So that would be, in the nutshell, sort of a summary of things to think about.
Very cool. And for the students that are not at the Maryland School for the Blind, that's the Optimum?
Yes, 180 Optimum.
About how much time do they spend on this?
That's a catch-22. So our strategy has been to schedule the Saturdays that they meet, and we have met from 10 to 2, which includes a break for lunch. And I want to say that we've scheduled anywhere from 8 to 10 Saturdays. We have asked for those students to be committed to those dates, and we realize that's really difficult for anybody to do, but especially teenagers, because they have all these great activities and things they want to be in. But it's really critical to not miss a practice with 180 Optimum, because missing one practice, particularly this year when we were learning Quorum for the first time, is really difficult. But you're making text-based coding that in the end is a couple pages long. So if you're absent during a concept, you might be lost for the rest of the season if you're not careful. So a really strong commitment to the team and being present. Sort of our strength and weakness was not only committing that time, but doing homework outside of this. So I think 180 Optimum matured a lot in this process this year because we took on a ton of work, but they also were reflecting very maturely at the end of the season and really realizing, hey, we could still turn it up a notch on, researching that project and citing sources. And if we do our homework outside of practice and really work on the project outside of practice among our team members, then we have more time with our coach to do more of the programming. But the trick with First Lego League is making sure that you balance all those things. So that's a challenge, but those would be the top 2 things I would point out.
And is there a cost for students to be a part of it?
So there hasn't been a cost to students at this point. There is a hefty registration fee, so there are expenses to this process, but our students haven't had to be involved in those costs at this point. We've been really fortunate to, obviously have the support of Maryland School for the Blind, and they're also supporting multiple coaches for 2 teams. They're also providing support for the team t-shirts, and we have had some sponsorships and help occasionally with that. So if there's anybody out there that wants to help us, by all means, we have a list of things that would be helpful for us, ranging from registration to the various equipment and software that we use to make things accessible for our students.
So when does the next Lego League start up? And for people that would want to be part of your team, maybe, ideally, what geographic region would students have to be from in Maryland, or does it matter as long as they can get to the practices? What would a student in Maryland look like in order to be part of your team?
So really at this point, as long as they can make it to the practice, they are welcome to come.
The practices are at the Maryland School for the Blind?
They're at the Maryland School for the Blind on Saturdays. We haven't had anyone reach out to us that I know of that was far enough away and couldn't manage the transportation, but that could change. So I'm going to tell Ruth Ann that you asked that question, not me. But I would encourage anyone that's interested, to reach out and get in touch with us. First Lego League season itself has been announced. So the theme is City Shapers for First Lego League. And it is sponsored by Star Wars and George Lucas this year. So how cool is that? But we won't actually get the Lego models, the robot game mat, all of that until August. And then school itself doesn't start until after Labor Day. So, we will be working on those dates and announcing those dates, I'm sure, before school is out this year, so that people can have them even before school starts. And they, need to reflect pretty strongly on what they want to be involved in and committed to.
Is there a registration process for students to sign up, or just kind of reach out to you? Or can they still sign up for the new season?
They definitely could sign up for 180 Optimum. We haven't done an official sign up yet through Maryland School for the Blind, so that's definitely all through our outreach office. And I will say that with the the added interest of it, we have a max of 10 members on the team, and it is growing. So if you are hearing this and you're interested, please get in touch with us and reflect on the time commitment and homework. And if you're really that eager, you can get started right now without me to a certain extent. So I did say that the mat itself they've released an aerial visual view right now, but it does have some programming clues on it, for example. So any robot mat is always going to have those big bold lines that we talked about. So if a student is really interested, and I hope some of my 180 Optimum members listen to this webinar, they could go to a certain website and review some information about Quorum. And I definitely can respond by email and share, previous codes. We can provide some support in that way, but really just learning the language, because once we start in September, we are competing by December or January at the latest.
Oh, wow, that's fast.
Yes, it is. Very fast.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this. I really hope that people get interested in it and see STEM as a really possible career for students. I think especially for our blind and low vision students, we have a lot of difficulty imagining how they can participate. And this is just another example of how that's possible, and it can lead to wonderful career choices, but also just, doing well in math and science in school and getting them excited. Do you have any personal stories that you want to share about maybe one student or something about how they, like something you saw them change, or I think you said a student didn't participate until this year?
Yeah, so I guess two things. We did have that student who, is amazing with Braille. I believe is going to the Braille Challenge for Nationals this year, Julia. And she advocated very strongly for herself and the team this year. So, judges are often volunteers, and they could be first-time volunteers. But when our kids were asked, which one do you prefer, Quorum, was that what it was called, or Lego EV3? There was this pause for a moment, and it was sort of like, really? Like, Quorum? Yeah, it was hard, but we were able to do it. And that was something like what she said, as well as the other students. So again, I think they spoke loud and clear, and I'm just really proud that First Lego League Maryland, First Lego League itself, and then Lego, sending representatives to our school to learn more about this process. I just think that's wonderful. And those business cards, I didn't put the final side of it, but when we handed out those business cards, it talked about the programming. It talked about the brick still needs speech, because it's just clicks right now. So there's still things to be fixed, so to speak. But on that final side of the business card, it not only gave the website, it gave an email address, and it also referred to our hashtags that we asked everybody to use all the time. So I don't know how many times our hashtags have actually been used, or how many emails Lego might have gotten because of a certain business card. But we definitely did something right, and we've been really positive about it. And just one more thing, I have on my iPad something that was really striking to me. I was fortunate to be at a computer science forum, and someone from the Maryland Department of Education was presenting there, and I just took a picture of it with my phone, and the top of it says quick facts about cybersecurity. It is pouring the rain outside. And I'm just going to read the text on it because this was news to me, but it really speaks to STEM careers. It says, by 2019, the U.S. Department of Labor Statistics projects the number of unfilled cybersecurity jobs to be more than 1.5 million across the nation. The need is growing 12 times faster than the overall job market in the U.S. And then it pointed out some great things about Maryland that I didn't know, but I came to Maryland from Kentucky. It says Maryland is home to more than 12,000 IT and cybersecurity companies, 60 plus government agencies tasked with protecting our nation from cybercrime, including the National Security Agency. Then it lists the National Cybersecurity Center for Excellence, the U.S. Cyber Command, and 17 higher education institutions that have been designated National Academic Centers of Excellence in Cyber Defense. So I guess that ties back to when students and parents are asking me about where can coding take you. This is an example of where it can take you. But it also can be a really fun rec and leisure activity to do with friends and siblings and family. Because I guarantee you, if you have a Lego robot going down the hall or one of these Sphero characters, you get some attention and you get some positive social interaction. So I think it's just a great opportunity all around for all of our students.
That's great. Thanks so much. And it just shows how it builds so many skills, like advocacy, like you were saying, they can speak up for themselves and interact with other children. So thank you so much for doing this webinar. We really appreciate it. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to Gina. We will put her contact info in the description of the video. All right, thanks so much. This was great. I learned. I mean, I think what you're doing is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm amazed myself at this point. You know, just like, oh my gosh, we did it.
Yeah, and I think, you know,